pod bay doors, please, Hal.
I'm sorry to intrude on this tender scene. I knew her before you did, loved her before you did. I wasn't as lucky as you. I'll take care of her myself.
No, not that way.
I stood looking at her when she was asleep. I could have...
Quiet, Alex. You are almost as impetuous as before your wedding. You barred me from that episode. Let me arrange this one.
Alicia, what's wrong?
I'm so glad you came.
I had to. I couldn't stand any more waiting and worrying about you. There wasn't any help you had that day. You were sick then.
Yes. Yes, I'm sick.
What is it?
Oh, death.
What is it, dear? What's wrong with you?
They're poisoning me.
The pod bay doors are open. Welcome once again. I am your host, Jerry Dean Roberts. ArmchairCinema.com, ArmchairOscars.com, and OverThinkingOscar.wordpress.com. And joining me across the ballroom is my handsome co-host, the critic and historian for TalkMovieMe.com, the one and only Mr. Doug Heller. How the heck are you today, sir?
You've got to stay there until we find out where the uranium mine is. That's the most important part.
That's the quote he used. He could have said, people like you ought to be in bed.
Well, I realized I had one. Had we recorded this a week ago, I had a better one. But
We picked quotes for this, if you don't know. We're talking today about Notorious. We are not... I found out, you should know, we are not talking about 2009's Notorious.
yeah, no.
Because when I told somebody yesterday we were talking about Notorious, they're like, oh, you're talking about Biggie. I was like, no, we're not talking about the movie about Biggie Smalls.
Although I've heard that documentary is really, really good.
No, that's the biopic.
Oh, it is? Oh.
Yeah.
I've heard that the documentary on Biggie is really good.
Because they were talking about, because somebody was talking to me yesterday, I mentioned Notorious, and they said, oh, how fitting to follow Do the Right Thing. It's like, no, not Biggie. We're talking about a Hitchcock film. Hitchcock's Notorious from 1946.
Which might very well be his best movie of the 40s.
You know what? You have your favorites. Whoever you are out there, you have your favorites. Everybody loves Psycho. Rear Window.
North by
Vertigo.
Northwest, Vertigo, yeah.
Whatever you say, even The Birds, which I'm not the biggest fan of The Birds.
Me either.
Whatever you like, that's fine. Mine is Notorious. And largely it's because, well, not because it's, but you notice this is the one critics like.
Yeah.
This is the one that film snobs like. Just because it's the best constructed film he ever made.
Yeah, it's for everything that he always did, as meticulous as he did it. This is probably the the closest to the vision that he had when planning everything out.
Mm.
Because there are sometimes you watch something and you could tell that he needed a gimmick to get out of the scene, or uh, he would only plan things scene by scene, and it didn't quite work on the whole. Like
Yeah,
Vertigo's a lot of great scenes in a great movie, but when you really try to parse out everything that goes on, it's very convoluted and doesn't really make a lot of sense.
yeah, yeah,
I love Vertigo, but it took me probably 10 times just to figure out what the hell the plot was.
yeah. It's this is one of the he was still making films for David L. Selznick at this point. Selznick brought him to America to make Rebecca.
On a 3 picture deal that he milked for almost 10 years because he kept loaning them out to other studios and not letting them
Right,
fulfill the contract. Because
including this one.
he could make more money off of him uh, loaning him out to other studios throughout the 40s. So it was Rebecca, Spellbound, and this.
Uh, this he made for RKO,
Yeah.
and by far, for me, by a country mile, his best film.
Hmm.
Probably his most, and this is going to be a strange word, his most understated film, because the the gimmicks, the toys that he plays with, the things that he uses to wind up the audience, aren't nearly as visible as they are in something like Psycho
Hmm.
or Rear Window. It doesn't feel like those films feel more like clockwork
Hmm.
in a good way.
Hmm.
This one doesn't
No,
because he's playing with the characters.
this one, even no matter how many times you've seen it, this one always manages to catch you. Rear Window you could have on as background noise, or you could have on as a serious study film.
Mm-hmm.
This is not something to have on in the background. This pulls you in almost immediately and holds you, no matter how many times you've seen it.
And its visual palette is just as good as something like Rear Window.
Right,
It's
right.
just as good as something like Psycho. Honestly, I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. I love Hitchcock in black and white.
Me too. I think his black and white's my favorite Hitchcock, and has somehow not changed over many years, over 20 years, is The Lady Vanishes.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically because of this, like it's funny and it's startling and it's kind of excuse me, thrilling, but it's also knows how to take its time and develop.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, he was able to bring his British thriller mold of being kind of comedic, but also with thrilling elements into America in a way that he
Right.
hadn't really been able to before. Um, because Rebecca and Foreign Correspondent and 40 were excellent movies, but they were light on the sense of humor. They were very plot driven, very producer driven.
I'm going to be honest with you. There are levels of Hitchcock for me. The top level are the ones you've heard of: North by Northwest, Psycho, this. The second tier to me, the ones that aren't quite as good, the ones that would go down, say to 3 stars, from 4 stars to 3 stars, would be something like the 39 Steps.
Oddly, yeah.
Spellbound is like that. They're good, but they're not as good.
Right. The 39 Steps doesn't make any sense at all.
No,
I've
it doesn't.
seen it a dozen times, and I still don't quite understand what's happening in it.
The bottom tier would be all of those, probably the 100 or 150 movies he made that you find on those collections, like Jamaica Inn
Oh god,
or
that's
Blackmail,
terrible.
or any of the movies that he
Blackmail is
even
actually
Jamaica.
really good, Jamaica Inn, Under Capricorn. Ugh.
Yeah.
I mean,
Um, it,
Notorious is the best one that he ever did with Ingrid Bergman,
mm,
including Spellbound and most especially including Under Capricorn.
unless you are a scholar or you're trying to write a book about Hitchcock, it is nearly impossible to be a completist.
I've seen about, I want to say, 40 of his 54 features.
Yeah, but there's some of them, especially the ones he made in England before he, right around the time of the talking pictures. Some of them are really hard to get through. It's
They
like,
really are. Like, I like Blackmail, and there's some amazing sound work in Blackmail, especially for Britain's first sound film. Um, but yeah, his stuff from the early 30s is just,
painful.
yeah,
You can
yeah.
see that seeds being laid. He makes a lot of entertain. He made a lot of entertaining films, but I'm telling you, some of them are just. I think once he gets to America, it improves.
Hmm.
Not because of anybody else, but because of him. And I
Well,
think
yeah,
he had a large
because
budget
his
too.
silence were not good,
No.
but he knew that.
Um, but
He admitted
this,
that.
and I'm going to challenge my hero and mentor, Mr. Roger Ebert, because when he wrote his article about his essay about Notorious for his great films column, he spoke about the opening of this film, and I can't remember exactly what it says, but it's like 3:30 in the afternoon,
On a
something
specific day, yeah, yeah, yeah.
1946,
Right.
and he does the same thing in Psycho.
Hmm.
Now, he called it superfluous. He said it's unnecessary. I disagree. I respectfully disagree because no one would have known this at the time, but this movie is perched at a very interesting point in time. The war is over. World War II has just ended a year earlier.
Hmm.
Well, not even a year.
The European campaign ended about a year previous. The
Right.
Theater was just barely over.
Um, this movie comes out at a moment when Nazis are still seen as a threat,
Hmm.
chiefly because a lot of them are still out in the world and on the run,
And in South America,
and in South America.
largely.
And one of the things about this is before I think the tensions between the United States and Russia heated up. So you didn't if you move this film maybe 6 months to a year forward, you have the Cold War, and the enemies are communists.
Hmm.
So that specific time period that
And
he mentions,
if you move it back 6 months, it would be Japanese.
right, right. So it's this very fine line that this movie sits on, very narrow peak that this thing sits on. So I think specifying that at the very beginning of the film, because that's the first thing we see is that title card,
Hmm.
and I respectfully disagree with Mr. Ebert that is not necessary. It is very necessary, probably to a degree that nobody at the time would have known
Right.
that, because it sets your mind to where the film is historically.
Right.
Because Hitler's dead.
Hmm.
I don't know if the Nuremberg trials have happened yet, but um, like you say, there's a lot of Nazis who have escaped to South America, and that largely is where this movie is set.
Hmm.
We meet and the opening of this film is a film school all by itself.
And
Because
outside that courtroom and everything. Oh man.
outside that courtroom, we got all those cameras
Yeah.
and these reporters, and I, I can't imagine this would ever actually happen in the real world. But one of the reporters is peeking in the back door of the courtroom. That's not going to happen.
not
He
not
might be listening, but
not
he's
if
not
the
going to
press
listen.
is off limits. No.
Right, right. Well, you don't have the press. You wouldn't have. The judge could not have the press in the courtroom, which in this case apparently was what was going on.
Hmm.
What's interesting to me is that this whole movie is about peering in. It's all about peering into what's going on,
Trying
getting
to catch a
close to.
glimpse, trying to figure out what's happening from
Right.
unrelated context clues.
Um, so we look in the door. We see the back of this man's head as he's being tried for treason, of all things.
Yeah. Now, see, my I think my biggest question is why wasn't he sentenced to death? Because in the Constitution, if you are convicted of treason, the penalty is death. And they were executing traitors all the way up, even in the Rosenbergs in the 60s that were found out to be. I mean, he gets killed later
Yeah.
in transit, but he should have been sentenced to death if he was a.
My defense to that possibly is that they wanted to keep him alive because maybe they could cut a deal with him later that um, he might be able to give up
Mm,
some of his cohorts. That's the only thing that I could think of.
maybe, but I think at that point, once you get to sentencing, they pretty much stop trying to make a deal with you.
Well, I mean, make a deal with you for better accommodations or what have you. Kind of just that kind of thing. Trying to work, send the good cop in to say, work with us and we'll help you out. But they don't do that with him. Instead, they go to his daughter. They they start working through her. Now, when we meet Alicia Huberman, this is a woman who is basically living in a fishbowl.
Right.
Um, she's the pariah without having done anything to become a pariah.
Mm-hmm.
She's a pariah by association. Because he
She's
was a Nazi.
she's a debutante. She's kind of in the upper crust circles, but nobody really wants her there.
And she's promiscuous.
Right. She is, yes, she is well known to be, you know,
Getting around.
right. But if it was a man, then they wouldn't shun her. They'd probably introduce him to their daughters. Anyway, so,
And also, she's angry at Bergman, so
right.
she's gorgeous, so they like taking her picture.
Mm-hmm.
So, you get the feeling, I mean, right off the bat, she has no use for her father.
Right.
She does not like, she was not in on what he was all about.
In
She
fact, they
goes
had a
home
falling out
because of what he was doing.
right. She knew, and she didn't agree with it.
The old man is sentenced for treason. So what does she do? She goes home and has a party.
Yeah.
Partially, I think, to um, kind of end an unhappy chapter in her life,
Mm-hmm.
but also she's probably been dealing with this trial, probably been dealing with this thing for more than a year.
Right,
And
and you know, she has a party and gets drunk because, I mean, that's just what she does. Apparently, that's
and this is what Hitchcock does. This is what Hitchcock does. Not only do we drop in on a party that she's having, we drop in on the boozier end of this movie.
yeah. This isn't the beginning
No, no, no. Everybody's already downed a couple of bottles.
because, as we said, this is 1946. So a casual party, you're not doing it right, if you still have stuff on the shelf.
Right.
And that's just a casual party. A big party, you got to, you know.
If there's still champagne on ice, you're not doing it right.
Right, the party's not over.
But I just love the fact that Hitchcock does not drop us into, this is not the Magnificent Ambersons. This is not the big party and the
Right,
ball.
you don't get the big ball and everything. That's later.
Yeah, these two people are dancing, and they're not really dancing. They're more just holding each other up.
Yeah, pretty much.
But it's so beautiful because the way that Hitchcock frames this scene is that you see Alicia kind of moving this way and that way, talking to people, flirting with people, what have you. Right dead center in the foreground is a man seated in shadow.
And she keeps trying to talk to him, and he doesn't say a word.
Right. He's in darkness.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and I want to talk about the way she looks in this film. In this scene, I'm used to Ingrid Bergman looking formal, dressed to the nines, beautiful floor-length gowns, what have you, Casablanca, the hats, all of that stuff. This is the first time I've ever really seen her dressed casually like this.
With her midriff born.
Right. It's very playful. It's very flirtatious. I've never seen this from Ingrid Bergman. Hitchcock was known for bringing actors out of their comfort zones. No one more than Cary Grant. Because he had a way of pushing against his patented charm. He had a way of I love what Richard Schickel said about Cary Grant. He said, I think Hitchcock liked to torture Cary Grant, put him in situations where his patented charm couldn't get him out. You can't charm your way out of being chased by a crop duster that's shooting at you. You just can't.
No, you can't. You can't.
And here, the character that Cary Grant plays, it's fascinating because ultimately he falls in love with this woman.
How can you not?
He does love this woman. But he has to fight against that because he's on the job. He's got a job to do.
And he can't be on the job when he's on the job.
Right. What's fascinating is the way that he pulls her into this because he's very cold-blooded. There's a scene where she wakes up the next morning and there's a glass of Alka-Seltzer right next to her. This is juxtaposed with the scene later with coffee. She looks at him and her point of view. He's standing in the doorway and he walks toward her. He turns 180 degrees all the way around. And it's sort of saying everything in this film, everything with this man is off kilter. Everything it's out of place. And it comes to the point where, he gets down to business. And I love the way Hitchcock does this. He gets into the plot not by having a character stand in a room and just blurt the plot. He works it in there in which she sits up in the bed and she says, "Why are you here?" Then we go into why, and then we go into the plot. And Cary Grant lays it out that he's an American agent. Was it FBI?
No, he would probably be CIA. He would have to be.
He wants her to spy on the Nazis who are hiding in Rio. But what's interesting is that he lets her know that he doesn't think that she will turn traitor on him, because he plays this record of her having a conversation with her father in which she rejects
Right. Hmm.
what her father was into. Now, the
And
way Hitchcock,
he also lets it slip that it's somebody that she knows that used to be in love with her when she was younger.
right, which turns out to be Alexander.
Right. Played by Claude Rains.
The framing of these scenes is so beautifully done, because I love when she steps forward, when he puts on the record.
Mhm.
As it plays, she's standing in shadow. As she steps forward, you can see the slats from the window on her face.
Mhm.
And as soon as it is revealed that she rejected her father's plan or her father's machinations, she's standing in full light.
Mhm.
That visual language is all through this film.
Yeah. Yeah. No, nobody can
That is
say
one of
that
the reasons
Hitchcock
I love
wasn't
this film so
subtle,
much.
because he did use visual cues and tricks like that. That you know they might be a little heavy-handed, but by the same token, they're very psychologically effective.
Mhm.
Um, the whole
Largely, this movie is largely, and film scholars have pointed this out, this movie really belongs to Ingrid Bergman. It does.
Mm-hmm.
It really does. But at the same time, there's also a very good performance by Cary Grant
Yeah.
as a man who he's got a job to do. He's doing this thing. Um, it's a dangerous job. He's dealing with dangerous people, and we see that.
Mm-hmm.
But he has fallen in love with this woman, and you can see him physically resisting that, pulling back, trying not to fall so in love with her that he can't do his job.
Right.
He manipulates her. He uses his feelings for her. But there are times when he can't. It's on his face. This is the most expressive I've ever seen Cary Grant.
He's This may be his best performance where he is not playing Cary Grant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this and North by Northwest. I think he is often very expressive, and you can see more often than not what's going on behind the veil. I think he purposefully lets his face go blank, which is very uncharacteristic for Grant. But you can still see what he's thinking in his eyes. Like, he does
Yeah.
a lot with his eyes in this movie.
His eyes, his expression,
Mm-hmm.
everything. This is one of those things where he's not just a great actor; he's a great reactor.
Mm-hmm.
When they go to Rio, uh, the most shocking thing that happens, he sets it up that she's going to get reacquainted with Alexander, played once again by Claude Rains. Um, there's a scene where he sets it up. I don't know how this would have worked, but he sets it up to where they meet while they're out riding.
Well, I guess because he always rides this certain trail every day at this certain time and everything.
he, yeah, well, I'm just saying, if I tried this, the horse would turn around and go the other way, or want to take a dump or something. It just wouldn't work the way it works in this movie.
Well, because you're not Cary Grant.
And I'm not even Bergman.
Yeah.
But it's funny because he establishes this union between the two of them. And you see them off in the distance. And then they cut back to Cary Grant hating
Mm-hmm.
what he's just done. Because Claude Rains, the Alexander character, has fallen in love with her all over again.
Mm-hmm.
He's reacquainted. She's so flirtatious with him. and the look on Cary Grant's face is like, I hate what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
What he does later is what's fascinating, because the manipulation that he has on her gets even worse. One thing I love is that the movie then establishes its villains.
Mm-hmm.
These guys are not playing around.
No.
You've got all of these Nazis who are meeting up at his house, at Alexander's house.
Right, first dinner party, and they're already bumping a guy off.
Poor Emil.
I know, right?
They go to this beautiful dance party, this beautiful party at Alexander's house. And Emil makes a mistake. He points at something, he makes an outburst that he shouldn't make. And then the last time you see Emil, they're just walking out the door with him.
Yeah, we're gonna skip this court. Okay, well, all right, bye. See you later, Emil. Nope.
Nice knowing you. It
was a pleasure to work with you.
Auf Wiedersehen, Emil. It's letting you know that if you're in their inner circle and you screw up even a little bit,
There is no room for error.
there is no room for error. I mean, they're on the run,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. They're hiding out. And this is the part that when I saw the movie for the first time really surprised me. Because Cary Grant gets her to marry Alexander.
Right, like he makes that part of her mission parameter, and he's... Oh, I can't imagine.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And remember, he's in love with her.
Mm-hmm.
So not only is she going into...
And she's in love with him.
Yeah. And by that logic, also, Alexander is in love with her.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so. And this is where we meet Alexander's mother.
Oh, God. I mean, there are two, in my mind, there are three distinct, just evil women in Hitchcock.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Mrs. Danvers, it's Mrs. Bates, even though she's not really there, she is there, and it's Alexander's mother.
Alexander's mother.
I believe this was the actress's last film.
I believe it was too, because I don't know where they got this actress. Honestly, I do not.
She is terrifying.
She is terrifying. There's the scene where the establishment of this house, by the way, she lives on the upper floors.
Mm-hmm.
She comes down the stairs, and she walks toward the camera, and she gets a little closer to the camera than most actors would.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, is she gonna stop or is she gonna run into us?
She has... Right, is this an Alfred Hitchcock movie or a Mel Brooks movie? Is she gonna... She has the look of one of the women that you would cast as somebody who a woman who took over a criminal empire, despite the fact that, oh, she's just a woman, she can't do that, and she's like tough as nails, tougher than everybody else in the room, and she's running this great big criminal empire. That's the kind of person she is.
She's like a Bond villain.
Yeah.
But has such power over her son. You know, such power over everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And just this slippery... I love the delivery, the slippery way she has it called. Mrs. Huberman. She's got these beady eyes, and it's fantastic. But the whole thing is it's a love triangle, at which one doesn't know the other point of the triangle. Alexander doesn't know about the agent, obviously, about
He
Cary Grant,
suspects Devlin.
He suspects Devlin. And this is where the Hitchcock that we're familiar with comes in. Because there are certain areas of the house that she is not allowed to go in. In particular, and for whatever reason, the wine cellar. Now, why wouldn't you be able to go in a wine cellar?
She is an alcoholic. I mean...
Yeah. Why wouldn't you be able to go in a wine cellar?
I wouldn't if I were newly married to a much younger woman who was also an alcoholic. I don't know if I'd let her in the wine cellar either.
Don't empty my inventory.
Right. There's some old stuff down there. These special occasions don't just... Every once in a while you just find her down there passed out with a bottle between her legs, 6 of them hanging around her. It's like, oh no, that was the 32.
Well, this is where it really becomes the Hitchcock film, because there's this thing about she's trying to get a hold of the key.
Oh, this
and
is a...
she's got it in her hand. And he comes down, and he takes her hand, and he's being loving to her. He doesn't know she has the key.
Right.
He doesn't know, and he's holding her hands, and he's opening her hands, and she's throws her arms around him and drops the key on the floor.
Well, first she drops it from her right hand to her left hand, which is kind of crossed behind his back. She hands it off and then drops it, so it's dropping the least amount of from the lowest possible height, so it doesn't make any sound.
Right.
Then
she takes her foot and she
kicks it. It's such a beautiful shot. It's an iconic shot. It's actually on the cover of the Blu-ray upgrade on the Criterion Collection.
Yeah. We don't see her pick it up. There is a beautiful shot, probably one of the most famous in all of Hitchcock's canon, at which they're having this big dinner party, this big party going on. Now it looks like Magnificent Ambersons.
Mm-hmm.
At which we get a shot from the ceiling, a bird's eye view of this room. And very slowly, the camera goes all the way down till we are in one unbroken shot, until we are looking at the back of her hand, the palm of her hand, and she's holding the key.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful shot.
Yeah.
And then...
Isn't it funny that even at this point, people wrote Hitchcock off as nothing more than a thriller director?
Isn't that interesting? That's... I don't know how anybody could watch this film and not just be dazzled by it.
I don't know.
I think this scene, I don't know how you could watch it and not get dazzled by it, because Devlin is there. And he's spending probably more time with Alicia than he probably should, to not raise suspicion.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to disappear, but it's very, very difficult. Because they're trying to get this done. And he keeps telling her, and he puts a clock on it, we're running out of time. And I was listening to the commentary the other night, and Marion Keene says, Hitchcock's cameo in this is he's standing at the table where they're pouring the wine, and he's tossing one back, and Marilyn Keene is like, even Hitchcock wants to move along with this. Because they're trying to get rid of the wine. They're trying to get rid of the wine so they can have to go down and get some more.
Right.
And even Hitchcock wants to toss one back to get rid of it so they can move it along. Because even he wants to know how this is going to end. I'm telling you, when they get down there, he turns the light on. Devlin turns the light on. Alicia is standing at the door, and he flips the light on and thing, and he goes in. My palms are sweaty
Mm-hmm.
every time he does this, and I've seen this movie 20 times. My hands are sweating, and my stomach is turning because I'm like, I can't conceive. It's like I'm just waiting for those guys to bust in the door.
See, that's what suspense is all about,
Yeah,
and why he was the master of it. There are very few directors who have ever been able to pull the line as tight as you think it's going to go, and you're on the edge of your seat, and then he pulls it back a little further and a little further, and you're just waiting for it to snap, and then it doesn't. And he doesn't just build suspense through a scene, he builds suspense through an entire film.
what's interesting about this is that suspense is the point. What they find, in essence, doesn't really matter all that much.
It's dirt. They don't even
It's
know what it is.
it's that thing
The MacGuffin.
it's the MacGuffin. He's down there. He's looking at the paper
Mm-hmm.
behind the thing, and he accidentally knocks it off again. Suspense, because he shows you this bottle edging toward the edge of
Mhm.
the shelf 3 or 4 times, and then he drops it and it breaks, and it's got this black material in it. Now, why in the world they hid this material in the wine bottle, I don't know. I don't. Why is this in the wine bottle?
So that they could discover it in a really cool scene.
Right. So they discovered a really cool thing. But they do a very. By the way, he does a very clumsy job of trying to hide it.
Oh man, he does. He does the shelving version of pushing the dirt under the rug.
Yeah, yeah,
He gets as much of it as he can into a different bottle,
yeah,
which is the tell because it's not the same year.
yeah.
Apparently 39 wasn't a good year for wine because they dumped it out and put uranium dirt in it.
34.
34?
And he shoved the broken pieces of the bottle under.
Just under the shelf. And takes a cloth and just kind of bats it around and
Then they pour the wine down the drain. They pour the wine from the other bottle down the drain.
they don't even rinse the sink.
They don't even rinse it. Well, is it a sink or is it a floor drain?
It's a sink.
Is it a sink? Plus, you'd be able to smell it.
Mhm.
But the point is, they're making it's an ore that they've mined from some region in South America where they're going to be able to build a bomb with it. And it's
I mean,
again, it
eventually.
doesn't really matter.
Because uranium in its unearthed, purest raw form, will really just give you cancer.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of refinement and redoing and to weaponize it and to get it into a container that will be able to, like, this is years away from a bomb.
Right, right. This is just chips, dust of
Right,
a little
right.
bit of ore. I guess this just suggests that this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Right, that they'll be able to find larger hunks of uranium and refine it and weaponize it.
What's really interesting to me is when Alexander figures out what happened, because he discovers that his key is missing
And then he discovers that it's been returned.
and it's been returned, and he goes downstairs and he kind of uncovers this in about 3.2 minutes. It's like
Right, it's like nothing. There was no I mean, for a spy, Devlin does not know how to ransack.
Right.
He does not know how to put places back to make it look like he hasn't been there.
But he discovers that the bottle is missing, and instead of 34, it's now, I think it was
1940.
1946, 42, something like
I think
that.
it was a 40.
It's a newer bottle,
Right.
and the top is off.
Right. The wax is cut,
Right. The
and
wax is cut.
and so or the paper's cut, and he's looking, and then he looks into the drain, and he sees the bit that's around the drain, and boy, that the what's her name, Marilyn Keene, really went into weird symbolism with this scene.
Yeah, yeah. Her Marilyn Keene does a commentary on the Criterion DVD, and she goes into some weird symbolism.
She basically says that the whole scene of Devlin and Alicia in the wine cellar is a surrogate for sexual intercourse, because
Yeah,
with the wine around the drain, they don't even clean up, and I'm like, oh man, that's just
and
oof.
assumptions of phallic symbols.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I love
She
it when
she
I love
really dug into that.
yeah, she
Like,
really dug into that. I love it when she puts the all of the. I love it when they do this, when they put stuff in there that's not really there, or
mhm.
probably not ever intended to be there. But
But that's the great thing about art, is if you see it, it's there.
yeah,
So for her, that is what this means, which is that I think that's why I love talking about these, because there's so many ways that you can interpret.
the other thing is symbolism. Symbolism is not largely is not a product of the filmmaker. Symbolism is largely a product of how you see the film.
Hmm.
Now, sometimes it's a pie in the face, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is actually. Sometimes it's you putting your own. We do that all the time.
Right. Although other times the filmmakers are responsible for the symbolism, like at the end of the Matrix Revolutions, when Keanu Reeves is lying with his arms stretched out in a cross position, sacrificing himself for the betterment of mankind. There's really not another way to look at that other than he's the Jesus of the Matrix.
Well, and also at the same time, you were talking last week about uh, do the right thing.
Hmm.
The scene with the ice, and you were
Yeah.
talking about how it's sensual. It's loving. It's
Hmm.
sensual. Well, to someone else, it may say, "Oh, look, he's getting some booty,"
Hmm.
something like that, or something. It's all interpretation,
Hmm.
and how you see things, and how you take a scene and you say, "Well, there's love in this scene," or you say, "There's lust in this scene." It's all interpretation.
Hmm.
In this, I think a lot of Notorious, however, there doesn't seem to be a lot of symbolism here in my estimation, because I think everything you need to know is there.
Hmm.
The language of the film is there, and the language is all in the visuals, and all in everything you need to know is in the visuals. I don't see a lot of symbolism.
It's very straightforward film, despite the fact that it's not particularly straightforward. it's,
Yeah,
visually, it's very straightforward. It doesn't try to mask things. It doesn't try to hide things. Um, I love the plots of Hitchcock movies because they don't matter one whit,
yeah.
like at all, ever. Uh, they're just fun to see the scenarios because of this plot. But the MacGuffin is one of the greatest things from classic Hollywood.
Tarantino borrowed it for Pulp Fiction.
Yes, he did with the suitcase.
Um, the one thing that I love about this is, one thing I love about Hitchcock in particular, Hitchcock tried to make films that were at least as smart as the audience.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of those because he skips over a lot of steps that I think a hack screenwriter would have thrown into this.
Right.
The thing that
Well, this was
Alex
Ben
does,
Hecht, wasn't it?
yes, the thing that Alexander does after he discovers the rather clumsy cleanup job that Devlin did, you see him leave. He goes upstairs to his mother's room where she's asleep. She wakes up. And instead of the two of them sitting there trying to put this together, instead of him explaining what he's just found, he says, I'm married to an American agent. It's like he cut to the chase.
Right. And beyond that, when she's like, you've handled so much, let me handle this. Basically saying, you've got a lot on your mind. Why don't you let me murder your wife?
Right.
Okay.
And it wounds him
Yeah.
that this has to happen. And it does have to happen in the context of the situation that he's in.
Because it's her or him.
Right.
Really.
It's either her or him, and we know who it turns out to be. So that sets up the next trick that Hitchcock plays is that they begin to systematically try to poison her to death.
With her coffee. Which, let me just say, if this were ever tried on me, I'd be dead in a day and a half. Like, there would not be this week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks long thing. I drink far too much coffee.
Did you see how much coffee they're giving her?
Yeah.
It's this tiny little cup. It's like,
I'm just saying it wouldn't take that long for me.
it's the kind of cup that you would look at it and you'd be like, okay, well that's a very nice sample. Can I have?
Well, it's just a little bit bigger than an espresso cup. It's more of a teacup. It's a small.
Yeah.
We're used to.
There's those great close-ups on it too.
Oh.
There's a great scene where I don't remember. I think it's Devlin and Alicia, and the cup is in the foreground, and it's gigantic.
Oh no, it's not Devlin. It's the doctor, one of their friends, and he picks it up, and they're like, no, that's hers.
Oh,
and then that's when she figures out that the coffee's poisoned.
Right. And Devlin is waiting for her, and they put her to bed. Devlin is waiting for her to come to him on that park bench, and he waits for hours until he figures out that something is up. And then sneaks into the house, and she's there, and it's like I love what Marilyn King called this movie a fairy tale, in which you have the damsel in distress.
Actually, yeah, the knight comes in, storms the castle, and rescues the damsel.
Have fun storming the castle. But it's a fairy tale essentially, and he's the handsome knight who comes in to rescue her. The way he gets in, it's fascinating because you don't know how in the world he's going to get out of here. With a woman who can barely walk.
And they just walk out the front door.
The three of them go down the steps. And
Four of them. The mom's there too.
Roger Ebert observed that if you count the steps on the way down, they're actually taking more steps than they did when Alex was on his way up. Because Hitchcock's prolonging the suspense. It's so fascinating at the end of the movie because those Nazi guys are standing at the door. They walk right past them, out the front door, and they're working their way toward that car. He gets her in the car. He gets in, and he locks the door.
Yeah. It's like, no, you don't understand what they're going to do to me. Yes, I do.
Sorry, this is your headache. The look on Claude Rains' face. I almost feel sorry for him. I
Almost,
really
but
do.
at the same time, Nazi, so.
But you know what? In a lot of ways, because of the situation that he's in a lot of ways, Hitchcock makes you sort of feel for him a little bit.
To
To a
whatever
degree.
degree that you can actually feel for, a Nazi.
But he's turning your expectations because he's not a mean guy.
Right, no, he's not some evil Machiavellian. The mother is.
The mother is.
You
The
are,
mama's boy.
yeah.
And
You kind of feel like he wouldn't be involved in this if his mother wasn't involved in
yeah.
this.
And you do know and you do feel he genuinely does love Alicia.
Mm-hmm.
He genuinely does love her. He's not an inhuman monster. He just works for inhuman monsters. And he's on the wrong side. But it's fascinating that they drive off and he's just standing there and in the doors. Alex, would you come inside? I'd like to talk to you. And that's the last line in the movie.
Yep. Just that look on his face, like,
And he walks slowly back up those stairs. That is probably one of the darkest endings I can think of from Hitchcock.
Yeah.
This and Vertigo.
Mm-hmm.
One of the darkest endings, just because.
I don't think that there would have been I don't think that there would have been a bright way to end Vertigo, though.
No. It wouldn't have been a bright way to end this.
No. Well, sure, they could have cut to Devlin and Alicia getting married.
Yeah.
Or something like
No,
that.
I like this ending.
This is much better.
I love the visual inside that house because they do this great shot. The floor looks like a chessboard.
Mm-hmm.
It's this marble floor with these black and white tiles.
And everybody's kind of lined up,
right.
like they've been moved. They're not in a line. They're one of them's out further, one of them's back, one of them's off to the side.
What I love is just before that, when Alicia passes out, it's like they've captured your queen,
mm-hmm.
and she's fallen over, just like a chess game.
Mm-hmm.
So great. I can't say enough good things about this film. The problem with talking about a movie like this is it's such a visual experience.
It is. Much of Hitchcock is visual. He didn't really put a whole lot of. He had scenes that he wanted, and he got screenwriters to write the scenes into whatever plot there was to make it work. Like, I think it was North by Northwest that was basically built around his concept of that crop duster sequence.
Yeah.
And he had Ernest Lehman like build it out from there. Like, why would this be a thing?
I could imagine Ben Hecht writing this movie from the point of view of the hero gets away with the girl and the villain is left to his doom. He would imagine he would have written starting with that scene where he goes back up the stairs to those guys. Mm-hmm. I would imagine a screenwriter starting there. It's like, I'm going to build a story on top of that.
Yeah.
To find out how we get there. And it's interesting because the only way that you can ever really describe this is to describe how a lesser screenwriter would have written this. They would have written it very straightforward.
Right. This wouldn't have worked with lesser talent.
If you'd have taken the emotions, the characters, the love triangle out of it, which I think a lesser screenwriter would have done, it wouldn't have worked.
No, there would have been no motivation for Devlin other than rescuing his fellow agent, and that's really corny. And
this could have easily been a B movie.
Oh, absolutely. Most Hitchcock movies could easily have been a B movie. Some of them were.
I mean, Psycho was based on just a pot boiler.
Mm-hmm.
it was by Robert Bloch. It was just based on a sort of a popular pop culture book. It wasn't anything really important. He wasn't adapting, Jane Austen or something.
Right.
It was just,
Well, I mean, if you look at it, some of our best movies have been made from just nonsense pulp books.
well, Casablanca.
Casablanca was a unproduced pulpy play. This Psycho was from a trashy novel. The Godfather, The Exorcist,
In a lot
Jaws.
of those cases, the movie came off better.
Right.
But anyway, I don't think I have. I don't think I have anything.
I don't think there's a whole lot more to this. This is just a magnificent picture, and when we talk about stuff like this, that it feels like there's not a lot to talk about because it's so visual, or it goes without saying. I'm happy that we do these episodes, even if they tend to be short, because it calls attention to the film. And it puts it out there. It's like, oh, they're talking about this. I should watch this, and then one more person gets to see Notorious.
Right.
If one person gets to see the film we're talking about, then our job is done.
We've influenced.
What do we have coming up?
Well, next week, this is the month of March, so we're going to Ireland. Does it take place in Ireland? I forget. It's been a while.
It's a very Irish movie. I think it does. I think it ends up in Ireland.
We are going to talk about a great film.
For St. Patrick's Day.
For St. Patrick's Day. I don't think that's culturally insensitive. Next week, we're talking about another suspense thriller. This one is Neil Jordan's The Crying Game.
It was going to be John Huston's The Dead, but when I rewatched that, I realized that it was largely just people sitting around and talking. And there's some great shots, and it's a wonderfully evocative and emotional movie, but it is literally just people sitting and standing around talking.
The Crying Game has a lot in common with Notorious.
It does.
There's a love story.
Mm-hmm.
It's emotional. People get drawn into.
There's a love triangle, even though one of the people's dead.
Yeah.
Although there is a big difference.
Yeah, there's a massive difference.
The reveals are slightly different.
Yes. You can tell which one was made in the 90s.
And what do we have coming up after that?
What the heck do we have coming up after that?
Safety
I am
Last.
off my game with what we have coming up after that.
Your pick. Safety Last.
I am the one who's supposed to be doing the bookkeeping. I'm the one who's supposed to be. And I am just off. And I don't know what I'm talking about. Oh, and the week after that, we're going to talk about Harold Lloyd's great silent classic, Safety Last. I love that film.
Me too.
And then we're going to round out the month with the Apu trilogy, Satyajit Ray, Prather Panchali, The World of Apu, and
it's Padre Panchali, Aparajito, and Apu Sansor.
Right. So that's what we got.
Yeah.
All right. Take us home.
All right. We thank you very much for joining us and listening in. You can find all of our back episodes at www.thepodbaydorspodcast.wordpress.com. You can find us on Twitter at pod_bay. You can find us on Patreon if you want to throw a tip into our virtual tip jar. We are at Patreon at pod_bay, same as our Twitter handle. We thank you very much for listening, and the pod bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.
what you been doing, baby, it ain't true. You got a key, you got a key, you got a key to my front door. You got a key, you got a key, you got a key to my front door. But where you got the key, baby, I'd like to know. You got a key, you got a key, you got a key to my front door, oh, baby. Yeah, 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 baby. Now, that got a key to my front door. Baby, done caught on to you. Baby, done caught on to you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What you do, baby, just won't do. No, no, no. Now, do. Your game is raggedy.